Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of our Municipal Campaign School. Today, we're going to be talking about the legal process of becoming a candidate in a municipal election, and I'm joined by our City Clerk, Stephen O'Brien, who you will get to know very well if you are a candidate in the City of Guelph. But first today, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Leanne Caron, and I am a four-time City Councillor in the City of Guelph. And I'm going to start our session today with a land acknowledgement. It's a very important part of public service and public process to ensure that we understand our role in the history of Canada as settlers and as a municipal government. The City of Guelph in particular is located within the Dish with One Spoon territory, or also known as Treaty 3, on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. The Dish with One Spoon is an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples and their allied nations to live peaceably on the lands throughout the region known as the Great Lakes. We all share resources and everything the Creator has provided for us since our arrival on Mother Earth. We recognize this gathering place where we work and we learn and we live, and it is home to many past, present, and future First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Our acknowledgement of the land is our declaration of our collective responsibility to this place and its people's histories, rights, and presence. So Stephen, welcome. If you want to take a few minutes to introduce yourself, the nature of your role, and then we'll get right into grilling you with the important questions.
Thanks so much, Leanne. My pleasure to be here today. As you mentioned, my name is Stephen O'Brien. I'm the City Clerk and General Manager of the City Clerk's office here at the City of Guelph. What I can say is maybe less about me is I've got a great team, a dedicated team of public servants who every 4 years plan for and deliver the municipal and school board election. I always make sure I add that in. It's municipal and school board elections. And in reality, our planning really starts pretty shortly after the preceding election. So we began planning for the 2022 election, not that far removed from the 2018 election. And maybe I'll give a little bit of context. There's 444 municipalities in Ontario, and each one of those has a municipal clerk, given that the role is a statutory role, which means that its responsibilities and requirements are outlined in the Municipal Act and other provincial legislation. So interesting fact, the position of a municipal clerk is referenced more than 250 times in approximately 60 pieces of provincial legislation, so different legislation. One of those is the Municipal Elections Act, which sets the municipal clerk as the returning officer within their municipal boundaries. So I'm not alone in this. There's a municipal clerk in your community, whomever's watching, that is also prepping and getting ready for the upcoming elections in October, and has been doing so, as I said, for probably some time.
You're way ahead of everything. I know that you're prepping well beyond a year in advance. And I'm glad you mentioned there's 444 municipalities, because we often hear in the news of the City of Toronto Act and other jurisdictions having different rules. But are the rules for municipal elections the same for the entire province, for every municipality?
Yes, generally. So the Municipal Elections Act sets the authority and the framework for municipal elections across the province. That includes the City of Toronto. You know, not to get into the weeds, but you're right, there is the City of Toronto Act, CODA as they call it, as well as the Municipal Act. So the Municipal Act is for the 443 other municipalities, and the City of Toronto has their own distinct piece of legislation. But really at the core of running municipal elections is the Municipal Elections Act. And that is, you know, for lack of a better term, set in stone for all of the municipalities in Ontario. And in that act, it sets out, you know, general rules, and they are, for the most part, all the same. So things like the fees for filing a nomination paper, the endorsement requirements for filing nominations, the requirements for opening bank accounts when you run and begin a campaign, those are all the same. I will caveat that with the fact that there are some nuanced differences between municipalities. So individual municipalities may have different requirements in terms of how you file your nomination. You know, we're all learning through a pandemic about how best to do that. So is it in person? Is it remote? Is it a hybrid of some sort? Individual municipalities will often also provide additional information to candidates as part of the nomination process. So, election sign information or election sign rules are going to be different per municipality. And in some communities, actually, there's two sets of rules, because you might have an upper tier level of government and a lower tier level of government that has different rules about where signs can be placed. So it can get a little bit complex, but generally speaking, sort of the hard and fast rules, the sort of framework rules around municipal elections are all the same for each municipality in Ontario.
So let's go to the core basics. I mean, the who, why, what, where, when. Who can run? Who is eligible to put their name forward as a candidate in a municipal election?
Yeah, that's the baseline to start at. So to run for a position on council, you must be eligible to vote in that municipality, which is pretty simplistic. But what does that specifically mean? So on the day you file your nomination paper, you must be a Canadian citizen aged 18 or older and live within the municipality. You don't need to be an owner of property within the municipality, so long as you live within the municipality. There's some other sort of questions that we often get, if your municipality is divided into wards. Guelph is, as you know, Leanne, divided into wards. You can run within any ward and you don't have to live within a particular ward in order to be its councillor. That being said, though, if you run in a separate ward, you're not able to vote for yourself in that ward, obviously, because you're not residing in that ward. Some other sort of quick rules about who can run or who cannot. You cannot work for a municipality and be on its council at the same time. So if you're an employee of a municipality and you wish to run for office, there is a requirement that you must take a leave of absence before you file nomination papers. And then if you're elected to that role, you must then resign your position. And then there's other instances, Leanne, that make an individual ineligible for running for office. And that includes, if you're a judge on any court in Ontario, you're ineligible. An MP, an MPP, a senator, those are all positions that would make you ineligible for municipal office.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that's the who. When things have changed, I believe the last election, the nomination process started in May when it used to start in January. So I think there might be some people who think that it starts in the new year. Can you outline the whens? What are some of the key dates that a candidate should be aware of?
Yeah, you're spot on. So previous to the 2018 election, we would have been accepting nominations as of right now, end of February, beginning in the early part of January. I think it made for a long campaign period for all of us, especially candidates, obviously, but even for municipal clerks and the teams that deliver elections in all of the viewers' respective communities. It meant getting a lot of things in order at the end of the year. So we've got a little bit of a buffer now. Provincial legislation changed those nomination dates. So the key dates are May 1. In this year, obviously, May 1st lands on a Sunday. So May 2nd is the first day that you can start to file nomination papers and your nomination materials. And then the ending period is August 19th. That's nomination day. So from May 2nd to August 19th in 2022, that's the nomination period, the window in which candidates can file their nomination papers. Of note, I will say there is a 2 p.m. deadline for filing nominations on August 19th. And some would say, well, is that flexible? Does it change? That's one of those things that I talked about earlier with the Municipal Elections Act that is hard and fast in the legislation. And so your local municipal clerk is unable to afford flexibility in that regard. So May 2nd to August 19th, 2 p.m. on August 19th. And what I would say is, there's lots of places to find information. Your best bet of finding information is your local municipal website. They will often have dedicated pages set up. I'll talk about ours, no doubt, as we get through this conversation, but check that site. The other thing I'd point to is there are some great resources online through the provincial website, through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. They have a great plain language candidates guide for the Ontario municipal and school board elections. The 2018 version is still posted. I understand the 2022 version, an updated version, is coming sometime in April. And again, a great plain language resource sort of overview of everything that candidates might need to know in terms of other deadlines as well.
Yeah, that's a great resource. So May 2nd, Stephen, but if I've decided I'm running now, I can go out and get signs and brochures and start fundraising, right?
Incorrect. You cannot. So The rules in Ontario require you to file those nomination papers, and you're not eligible to incur expenses or receive contributions until you've done so. So you can have decided, that's great. In fact, many communities will see information popping up in local media about candidates that might be seeking office, incumbent candidates that may be deciding to run or not run. Realistically, they can make those decisions certainly on a personal level, but there's no ability to formally campaign until that May 2nd date comes and you file a nomination paper. And I would say too, we won't know for certain who is or isn't on the ballot until after August 19th. So those rules are very important in terms of the timing.
Yes, and thank you. That's why I asked that question, is because if you file and your expenses show that you actually raised funds or expended funds before the nomination period, that's a violation of the Municipal Elections Financing Act, and that's very serious, which is why I raised it. Is you don't want any serious violation of that act, because these rules are in place for a level playing field for all candidates. And if you're found in non-compliance, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you are then banned from running for office in a subsequent election.
Yeah, so there are some set rules around financing. If financial statements aren't filed on time, there are penalties to that effect. The reality is that we also have compliance audit committees. Every municipality must have a compliance audit committee, so an election compliance audit committee that is in a position to review candidate financial filings should there be a complaint that's levied against an individual candidate. And you're quite right, incurring expenses or receiving donations in advance of the campaign period is not permitted. I think it's perfectly fair. I think good community dialogue can happen when candidates come forward and say, I am considering a run at office. I'm wanting to make it known. But you've got to be really careful, because there is that sort of gray, blurry space around, what does that mean? Is that just a personal message into the social media world? Okay, probably not a challenge. But if you're purchasing collateral or some kind of material or information to allow you to make that kind of announcement, well, then that could be construed as a campaign expense, and then again, that would not be permitted. So.
Yeah, thank you for that distinction. That's important. So let's fast forward. It's May 2nd.
Yep.
What would a potential candidate do? Do they need an appointment at City Hall? Do they need to, what do they need to get together to come and visit you to get that process started?
Yeah, and again, as I said earlier, the key location to go is your local municipal website. So in Guelph, obviously guelph.ca is the place to go. Specifically, guelph.ca/vote will have information. If you go there now, you'll see some generic information. We will be launching sort of a more specific election page. I always say that the best place to get the true facts about when to run, how to run, the requirements, and perhaps most importantly and specifically, election results at the end of the election is your local municipal website. So in Guelph, that's guelph.ca/vote. We will have all the details there for potential candidates in the coming weeks. In general, municipal clerks, as I said earlier, we're actively preparing for this. And often the sort of first group that we get ready for are the candidates. And so I would suggest that you reach out to your local municipal clerk or the clerk's department to get more details. We have a responsibility as clerks to give notice of who can be nominated and the process and procedure for doing that. And generally speaking, what we're looking forward to, specifically to your question, Leanne, around an appointment, that kind of thing, I think just by nature of what we've lived through over the past couple of years, we're going to be trying to sort of manage it in sort of an appointment-based approach so that we can get all the information that candidates need given to them specifically in a uniform way and in a way that that still respects public health guidelines. I know things are changing, at least in Ontario, as of March 1st. But I think we're all very keen to sort of make sure that everyone's safe from a public health standpoint as well. So I suspect our process will involve a bit of a hybrid approach. Probably get your information online, meet with a member of the clerk's office team, myself or some of my team members, and then come in to sort of finally put pen to paper in person for a quick short minute, and then that's that.
Okay, thank you. Nomination fee, is there a cost to becoming a candidate?
Yeah, and this is one of those things that again is set and hard and fast in the legislation. So it doesn't matter if you're running in Guelph or you're running for office in Mississauga, Toronto, somewhere in southwestern Ontario, and where I know the campaign school is kind of focusing. I think there's the municipalities from Wellington and Oxford counties are also involved in this partnership. So the fees are the same. $100 for any office other than the head of council, which is a $200 fee. What I will say is we call it head of council. It may be a reeve, it may be a mayor, but generally speaking, head of council is sort of the term. So again, $100 for most candidates, $200 for head of council. The nomination fee is interesting, Leanne, is that it will be refunded provided that you file your campaign financial statements by the deadline. And also the nomination fee is considered to be a personal expense and not a campaign expense. And that goes back to the earlier sort of discussion we had. You can't incur a campaign expense until you filed your nomination paper. So the province and the legislation recognizes that that nomination fee is a personal expense, hence why it can be refunded, provided that you file your financial statements on time.
Great, thank you. And I'll add a little bit of commentary in saying that the role of the clerk's office is absolutely essential for every candidate to check the website, download the forms, do the reading that's on the guelph.ca vote site. Although this campaign school is intended to provide a real life experience of those who have been in office and running a campaign or working with the municipality, the truth is that the only neutral, and I can attest that our clerk's office and the whole team are a neutral source of information. They are completely apolitical in this process. Their role is to just provide with information. So one of the things they won't do is give you advice on what you should do or who should be on your campaign team. They are a completely neutral source of information. And that is to ensure that all candidates have a level playing field. So reiterating what Stephen said, that for information, for completely neutral information, guelph.ca/vote, or the County of Oxford or County of Wellington, those should be the sites to just go for basic legislative information. So speaking of legal requirements, it can be kind of scary. Admittedly, I looked at all the regulations and thought, oh, I need a lawyer on my campaign team. I need a certified general accountant on my campaign team. What are those legal requirements and how scary are they really, Stephen?
Yeah, I'll certainly get to that, Leanne. Maybe I'll just jump back to some of your previous comments as well. The professional association that we belong to as municipal clerks requires us to be apolitical in that way. So we've got a mandate to be to provide the same level uniform advice that we would provide to all candidates. And again, I use the term advice a bit loosely. It's not sort of hard and fast advice, but we're happy to guide and support candidates through the process in terms of the times, the gates that need to be passed, the things to sort of look out for, and just general information. But a perfect example is that candidate campaign financial statement. So you will have to file a financial statement. It can be a little bit more onerous if you cross a certain dollar threshold, but generally speaking, it's fairly simplistic. It takes time. You do need to sort of carve out some time to do that. That's one of those things, Leanne, where, as you suggested, we're not able to provide advice on how best to fill that out. So what I would say to answer your question is, there's no formal requirement to have a lawyer on your campaign team, or as you noted, a sort of a certified financial accountant or financial expert. But I will say that, all that being said, and because a campaign is a big draw on the individual candidate, I understand and know that many candidates circle themselves with volunteers that support them in various different capacities. And so it's likely wise to designate someone from your campaign team, your volunteers, to sort of be the point person on the requirements of the Municipal Elections Act from a nomination standpoint, from a campaign finance perspective. These are really good things to ask and discuss during the other segments, I think, of this campaign school, and I'm sure that it will come up. But yeah, I would suggest find out and learn from what others have done and what successes they've had, because I think there's strength in sort of that knowledge sharing. We can certainly answer some of the basics, but find folks that can be a dedicated person to understand those things. Again, the candidates guide that the province offers is a wonderful resource. It takes that Municipal Elections Act that can be a little bit complex and nuanced and offers it in a plain language format and does some really good examples of giving practical examples of how to navigate campaign finances.
Thank you. That's great advice. And speaking of advice, and that you don't give advice, you're not without a lot of experience. You've dealt with hundreds of candidates over the years in your position. And is there any wisdom that you can share with us about challenges that candidates face that you can give some wisdom today to help potential candidates avoid those pitfalls?
Yeah, I think I'll say this, and I'll I'll be channeling everybody's high school teacher when I say this: is don't be late. That's the biggest thing. Don't be late, and I don't mean that in sort of an authoritarian kind of way to
Was
say
that
it, but
advice for me, Stephen?
no, never, no.
I've never been late, but I've sure been close.
And I think I say that again, tongue in cheek. It's good to have a laugh about it, but as I said, that 2 p.m. deadline is a good example. I can't flex that. And again, it comes back to a couple of things. That deadline can't be moved because it's in the legislation, but perhaps more importantly, it can't be moved because it's not fair to other candidates. And we're all about a uniform, even playing field. And I'll give you a really practical example. Sometimes candidates ask a lot of questions about, I'm beginning to sort of, I'm assuming, build a bit of a campaign platform, but I don't have a lot of great details about nuances of the cities. We get questions from candidates about how does this city service operate and function. We can answer those things. We often partner and act as a conduit to get that information for candidates. But we will provide that information to all candidates so that it's fair and all candidates are privy to that same information.
And
Going
that's
back
information that you would give to any citizen, whether they were running
Certainly.
for election or not. If someone called tomorrow and said, I need to know how this works, your office would provide that.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to my comment about don't be late, as I said, there's no ability for us to be flexible with dates. So, and I guess I would say, clerks can be sort of tend to be very much rule-oriented folks. So we might not be the type to waver regardless of those things. But that fairness is really key for us, candidates and electors included, because those strict adherence to those legislative rules is a requirement. What I would say sort of to best prepare for that kind of thing is read all the information that is available and provided to you by your local clerk's office. Ask questions if something is not clear. What I would say is, and I don't like to be doom and gloom, but the consequences can be significant. I mean, you talked about not being eligible to run for office in a previous question that you had. There's examples of, for example, a candidate in Toronto recently, the case went to the Supreme Court. It circled around campaign expenses around a celebration event. So, you spend a lot of time on the campaign trail. You're perfectly permitted to have a celebration event with volunteers and those that supported your campaign, but there's rules around how much you can spend. In this case, the gentleman overspent that. And the act is pretty clear. The clerk had to issue a notice that the individual was no longer able to serve office because they stepped over that line. So in the campaign finance rules. So
yeah, and those aren't just local bylaws; those are provincial laws. So yeah, it is significant. So
yeah,
since we're talking about donations, what is considered a donation?
That's a great question. Donation is broad. And most people will think of donation as a monetary value given to a candidate. But campaign contributions are money, goods, services that are given to you as a candidate for use in your campaign. And that includes actually money and goods that you contribute to yourself. So, and I'll get sort of the nuance of that, as we go through. Actually, maybe I'll just mention it now. When you file your campaign your nomination papers, you're required to then open a bank account. And the reason is that it's sort of a separation of personal finances versus campaign finances. And so you can donate to yourself as a candidate. You can self-fund your own campaign, but there should be a very clear demarcation of how you've done that. So funds have gone from personal account A to campaign account B, and there's a very clear divide there. If you're given, what I would say too, Leanne, is if you're given a special discount on a good or service that you're purchasing for your campaign, the difference between what you were charged and what the market value would be is considered to be a contribution as well. What I would say is corporations and other businesses are not permitted to make contributions to candidates. If you're being offered a discount, you should make sure that whoever is offering the discount is entitled to make a personal contribution to your campaign. And again, the sort of a good example of that is if a professional who would normally charge for a service gives you that service for free, maybe it's graphic design folks, maybe it's a print house, that kind of thing. It's the market value of that service that is considered to be a contribution. So you can see that contributions are more than just monetary, and they have to be accounted for in a very clear and transparent way.
Right. And you mentioned, I just want to reiterate, it can't be the business that gives you that service. It has to be an individual, a name, because you do have to list those names. And along those lines, is there a threshold there? What is the contribution limit? And will those names be public, the people who donated to you?
Yeah, there is. So the rules around the limits are pretty clear in that candidates information guides. I'm going to refer folks there because there's sort of an aggregate total and individual totals, and it can muddy the water, but that's your best spot to go. Again, your clerk locally will provide that information. And yes, the answer is we do have to make that information public. So if it's over a certain dollar amount, it's going to be recorded on your campaign financial statement when you file it. And those campaign financial statements are public documents. In fact, you can go to guelph.ca and see all of the candidate campaign financial statements from 2018. We're obliged to keep them on there until this election comes that we're heading into now. So the rules around freedom of information, protection of privacy in Ontario that municipalities follow allows for that information to be made public. And that's a really good discussion to have with campaign contributors. So again, read the material, understand the material, so that you're in a position to be able to advise some of your contributors that, you know, if you're over this amount, we have to make that donation known on our financial statement when we file it.
And how would a candidate track all of that? Do they need to keep receipts? Do they need to provide receipts to donors? What kind of paperwork is involved in all of that?
And again, I think this comes back to one of the previous questions we had. It's really, really valuable to find someone amongst your team, and maybe you're doing it yourself, and that's fine. I don't want to say that you've got to sort of, build a large team. I think the other segments that will come in this campaign school can really tell you about how best to do that. You can still do this on your own, but you're going to have to carve out time to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, for lack of a better term, or at least the decimal places are in the right spot, because you are responsible for keeping records of the financial activities related to your campaign. So the Elections Act does not require to use a specific accounting system or a specific type of receipt, for example. If you do want to consult with an auditor or an accountant early in your campaign, that's not a bad thing to do. In some cases, you can again dialogue with those that have been there before and find out what best approaches they took. I think another really big key here, Leanne, and a good suggestion is, is to look through the campaign financial statement form. They are standard. They are uniform across all municipalities in Ontario. You can get them on the Ontario website. And again, your local municipal office and the clerk's office in your municipality will have these things posted online as well. But that campaign financial statement is what you have to file following the election. And so that's a great place to start to get a sense of what's required, what's needed, what has to be filled out, so that you can then base your sort of record keeping system around that. But generally speaking, receipts are a really good practice. Again, the form of those receipts is not written in stone, but I'm sure there's a lot of great examples out there. We don't actually collect those receipts. So as the clerk's office, I'm not going to ask you for your campaign receipts when you file your campaign financial statement. I'm just going to ask for that form to be filed with us. So, but you'll have to retain those financial records until the next election. So if you're seeking office in 2022 and you're successful, that's wonderful. Even if you're not successful, it's wise to keep those records until 2026, so that you've got all those records on hand. And then the final thing I'll say is receipts issued for every contribution should be given when you're accepting that contribution. I think things like the date that you issued the receipt, even issuing a receipt to yourself if you make a contribution. Those are all really good practices to employ.
Yeah. Thank you. So this session might be the scariest part of a candidate's investigation into their potential candidacy, the legal and financial obligations. And when people say, well, what pre-work do I need to do before I consider running? I always say, you know, read the Elections Financing Act, read the Municipal Act, you know, read the Planning Act, read the, you know, there's so many pieces of legislation. It's mind-boggling that kind of the prep work that one could do. But realistically, the Municipal Act and the Elections Financing Act for a candidate are the most important pieces of legislation. And I can attest again that your office is an excellent source of interpreting those acts. It can be legalese and legislation can be very intimidating for many candidates, but your office is very open to having candidates ask questions about interpretations of the act. And as you said, Stephen, that advice you would give to anyone, that
Right.
information source that you provide is open to any candidate.
Yeah, and I would say, Leanne, you know, to answer that, to sort of add into that, a really good starting place is that candidates guide that will be released by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So we're anticipating the 2022 version will come sometime in April. So that gives you some time to sort of digest it before May 2nd is on your doorstep. That's sort of step one. I can also say that municipalities around the province, and I know this because I'm talking to my colleagues regularly, they're planning candidate information sessions. We have 2 planned ourselves for Guelph specific candidates, both municipal and school board candidates, one at sort of the tail end of March and one into the middle part of April, sort of an afternoon and an evening to sort of capture people's availability. Those are great places to get information. And again, read the information, read the documentation that's provided on your local municipal website, ask questions. It is a lot, but if you carve out some space, you'll find that you probably get to a comfortable spot and you're ready to go. And like I've always said, there's lots of folks that have been there before. It's a well-worn path to sort of deciding to run for office and hopefully being successful in election. And so lean on the resources that you can, or the connections and networking connections that you have, for sure.
Great. And actually, just as you were speaking, Stephen, I'm reminded that although this municipal campaign school, many think it's just for those who are going to run for elected office on city council. But all of these rules apply to school board trustee positions as well. You mentioned when we're talking about who can run on school board trustees, do you have to be an elector on a specific school board to run for a specific trustee position?
Yeah, that's correct. So the rules are the same: 18 years of age, Canadian citizen, living within the boundaries of the school board, the areas in which the school board operates geographically. And yes, you know, municipal elections are more complex than our federal and provincial friends, and so we've got different categorizations of electors in the sense of which school board they support. So you need to be, you know, in Guelph, I can use the example, if you're running for the Upper Grand District School Board, you need to be an English public elector. If you're running for the Wellington Catholic District School Board, you need to be an English separate elector. We have 5 different categories of electors: English public, English separate, French public, French separate, and then a non-resident elector status that we term. So it gets a bit nuanced, it gets a bit complex, but again, the information will be out there available very shortly, if not already, in your local municipality, and you can start to sort of read and digest at your own pace.
Great. Well, believe it or not, the time has just rolled by, but you've shared with us so much information today, Stephen. Do you have any final comments, advice, or information that we might have missed today as we wrap up?
What I would say is, I think you'll find that the clerk's offices in your communities, again, the theme has been that we're keen and eager to help. It's something that we look forward to. It's a lot of work for campaigns. It's a lot of work for you as potential candidates and candidates that run. It's equally a lot of work for those of us that are administering this. There's voting locations to book, and voting equipment to secure and test and deliver out, and hiring of hundreds of staff, depending on the municipality where you live and where you're seeking office. But we're all very keen and excited and eager to help out. I will say this too, Leanne, that there's a very deep respect, I think, that a lot of municipal clerks, municipal staff across the province have for those that want to run for office. This is really foundational to what we do. You'll find that all, I think I can say, all public servants are recognize the importance of what October 24th, 2022 is. So we're keen to help. There's a deep level of respect for those that choose to put their name forward. And we're here to help as best we can in a very uniform and fair way. And we look forward to seeing a lot of a lot of individuals that want to come forward and put their name forward as of March 2nd. So we'll be ready and waiting, and we'll be there with a smile on. Sorry, May 2nd. My apologies. Yes, May 2nd. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. And on behalf of potential candidates and their supporters in Oxford, Wellington, and Guelph, I really want to thank you for joining us today for the Municipal Campaign School. The level of expertise and experience that you have in this regard has been really helpful, and I hope those watching today would agree. So again, thank you for your time, Stephen.
Great. Thanks, Leanne. Take care. Good luck, everybody.